Under the bruised sky of late dusk, Ezekiel Holt reined in his horse at the edge of his field. The wind tugged at his coat and rattled the dry cornstalks like bones. He thought he was alone until he saw movement by the fence post. A boy crouched low, thin as a reed, eyes wide with the kind of fear that already knew its shape. When Zeke swung down from the saddle, the boy flinched, raising an arm like a shield. His lips parted, and the words slipped out in a quiver. "Are you going to hit me with the whip too?" The question struck harder than any lash. Zeke's mouth opened, but no answer came. He stood still, a man shackled by silence. The boy's face, dust-caked, streaked with old bruises, waited for cruelty that did not fall. Zeke dropped the reins, crouched low, and held out a hand. His voice, rough from disuse, rasped only a single word: "No." He led the boy inside the farmhouse, a place as lonely as a forgotten chapel. Shadows clung to the corners, and the wooden boards groaned like they carried memory. Zeke set bread on the table, poured milk into a chipped tin cup. The boy, no more than 10, sat stiff, arms folded tight against his chest. He did not eat. Only his eyes moved, quick and mistrustful. Zeke did not press. He took his place at the far end of the table, hands rough with soil and callous folding and unfolding. The silence stretched between them, broken only when the boy whispered into the dark, not to Zeke, but to whatever nightmare trailed him. "Don't let them take Clara. Don't let them tie her again." He jerked awake with a cry, face wet with tears he hadn't meant to shed. Zeke watched, feeling the echo of his own brother's cries, long buried, rising like smoke he could not wave away. At dawn, Zeke saddled his horse and set the boy before him. He carried him into town, though every step of the ride he wondered if it was a mistake. The townsfolk gathered like crows when they saw them. Whispers spread quicker than dust. "Where'd Holt pick up that stray? Mark my words, it'll be trouble." Farmer's lost his wits. Even the sheriff leaned back in his chair outside the office, thumbs hooked in his vest. "You can't just take in whoever the wind blows," Sheriff Crowley said, his tone sharp but eyes curious. "Stray like that could be a thief's brat. Could be worse." Zeke stared at him, unmoving. He was a man who had forgotten how to argue. His silence was its own language. He bought bread, beans, and a coil of twine, while the boy clung close, small fingers knotted in Zeke's sleeve. Each whisper the crowd threw curled around Zeke like barbed wire, pricking old wounds of failure. Back at the farm, the boy ate at last, tearing bread with small, frantic bites as though time might steal it from his hands. Zeke asked his name. The boy hesitated, then whispered, "Caleb." It was the first gift he had offered. Zeke nodded, saying nothing more, but something in his chest eased, just enough to breathe deeper. The days folded one into the other. Caleb moved like a wild thing, never straying too far from the farmhouse, never quite trusting the quiet. Zeke split wood, worked the soil, lived as he always had, though now the silence was shared. At night, Caleb dreamed aloud again, calling for Clara, begging shadows to leave her be. Zeke lay awake in his own bed, fists clenched, wishing he could carve out the boy's fear with the blade of his hand. One afternoon, Zeke found Caleb standing barefoot at the edge of the field, staring down the road. The boy's eyes lit with recognition, then dimmed into dread. A figure approached slowly, stumbling in the heat. A girl, thin and sunburned, her dress torn at the hem. She carried herself with the stubbornness of someone who had walked until the world blurred. She made it to the gatepost before her knees buckled. Caleb bolted, arms flung wide. "Clara!" His voice cracked into joy and grief. The girl dropped to the dirt, clutching her brother with both arms, face pressed into his hair. Her body trembled with relief and exhaustion. Zeke stood at a distance, as though intruding on a sacred rite, the sun sliding low behind them. He felt something old stir in his chest. An ache, yes, but also a strange, reluctant hope. That evening, Clara sat at Zeke's table, smoothing the frayed edge of his tablecloth with nervous fingers. She was no more than 17, her eyes bright, but shadowed by miles of hard road. Caleb slept near the hearth, crumbs still in his hand. Zeke ladled stew into a bowl and set it before her. She hesitated, glancing at him, then whispered, "Why did you help us, Mr. Holt?" Zeke did not know how to answer. He stared at the lamplight dancing against the wall, remembering the boy's question at the fence, remembering how his own voice had failed him then, too. Words, it seemed, had been stripped from his life long ago, leaving only actions to speak for him. In town, whispers already stirred. Word a young woman under Holt's roof had tongues wagging like church bells. Some said she was no sister at all, but a girl Holt had taken in secret. Others muttered of scandal, of sin crouching in the lonely farmhouse. And there was another story, flaring brighter still. Eleanor Whitfield, the mail-order bride who had stepped off the train only to spurn the fat rancher waiting for her. Prideful thing, they said, thinks she's better than Malloy. Foolish girls starve. Laughter clinked in the saloon glasses, cruelty poured as freely as whiskey. Zeke heard none of it yet. In his home, Clara stitched a tear in her dress by firelight while Caleb murmured in his sleep. Zeke sat across from her, the silence no longer barren, but laced with something unspoken, fragile as thread. The lamplight cast a halo over the girl's bowed head. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters. Clara raised her eyes, searching his face. "They'll come looking," she said softly, voice edged with fear. "The ones who hurt us." The words hung heavy. Zeke's chest tightened. He thought of the boy's first question, of the whip that still haunted his sleep. He thought, too, of the crowd's eyes in town, watching, judging, ready to believe the worst. The fire cracked, sending sparks up the chimney. Zeke said nothing, though his silence was louder than a shout. Clara studied him, waiting, and in her eyes flickered both hope and doubt, whether this man could be their refuge or only another hand to fear. And for the first time in years, Zeke wished for words, because outside the wind carried whispers, and tomorrow they would not be kind. The morning after Clara's warning, Zeke rose to the sound of gossip carried on the wind. Even before he stepped into town, he felt it pressing against his skin, the way wheat bends under a storm. Whispers clustered at the mercantile, the saloon, the churchyard. Holt's got 2 strays now. A girl, too. Trouble's taken root under his roof. Zeke met the stares without reply, but inside he felt the old shame gnawing, the voice that told him he was a man unfit for company, a man the world would rather watch fail. Caleb walked at his side, clinging close. Clara followed, head lowered, a scarf drawn tight around her neck, as if it could hide her from the tongues that lashed worse than whips. Sheriff Crowley stopped them on Main Street. "Folks are talking, Holt," he said, not unkindly, though his words carried the weight of warning. "You taken too much that isn't yours. The town will turn its back for good. Best to keep your head low." Zeke's silence was answer enough, and the sheriff tipped his hat in weary resignation. But Clara flushed scarlet under the stairs, and when they returned to the farm, she did not step outside again for days. Caleb tried to be brave, but each time the wind rattled the shutters, he flinched. One night, as Zeke was mending harness leather, Caleb whispered, "He'll come. The man with the whip. He always comes back." Clara hushed him quickly, but her trembling hands betrayed her. Zeke listened, jaw tight, and for the first time he felt the heavy coil of rope on his wall as if it were a snake waiting to strike. Rain came 2 nights later, soaking the earth and pounding the tin roof. In the midst of it, a knock sounded at the door, timid, soaked through with desperation. Zeke opened it to find Eleanor Whitfield, the mail-order bride who had defied Henry Malloy at the rail station. Her dress clung heavy with rain, her eyes weary but burning with stubborn fire. "I had nowhere else," she said simply. Zeke stepped aside. Clara fetched a blanket. Caleb stared as if beholding some ghost of grace. Days folded into a strange rhythm. Eleanor helped with chores, her hands raw from the washboard, her laughter softening the sharp edges of the farmhouse silence. Clara warmed to her, grateful for another woman's presence. Caleb followed her like a shadow, asking quiet questions about trains and faraway cities. Zeke spoke little, yet one evening, when Eleanor left her shawl on the porch rail, he set an umbrella beside it without a word. The gesture was small, but Eleanor noticed her eyes lingering with a gentleness that unsettled him. But the town noticed too. Farmers collecting them now. Men sneered in the saloon. First orphans, now the bride Malloy couldn't stomach. The laughter was cruel, the kind that stings long after it fades. Malloy himself nursed his wounded pride with whiskey, swearing aloud that no one made a fool of him. It was mid-afternoon when Malloy rode up to the Holt farm, his horse kicking dust like smoke from fire. Caleb froze on the porch, face white as chalk. Clara pulled him close, but Malloy's booming voice rolled over them. "Holt, you got something of mine." His eyes, mean and gleaming, settled on Eleanor where she stood in the doorway. "That girl belongs with me." Zeke stepped forward, his boots sinking into the damp earth. His silence, once mistaken for weakness, carried the weight of thunder. Malloy sneered, jerking his reins. "What's this? Farmer thinks he's a hero now, taking in strays and cast-offs, making a charity house out of his dirt farm." His hand slid to the whip coiled at his saddle. Caleb cried out, the sound ripped from some deep scar within him. "Not again." Clara clutched her brother, her own body trembling as she placed herself between the boy and Malloy's shadow. Eleanor's hand found Zeke's arm, not pulling him forward, but steadying him where he stood. In that moment, something shifted. All the years of silence, all the shame Zeke had carried like a yoke, burned into resolve. His voice, when it came, was low but unyielding. "She stays." The words cut through the air like steel. Malloy laughed, but there was no mirth in it, only menace. He cracked the whip once, the sound splitting the field, and Caleb cowered against Clara. But Zeke did not move. His eyes, steady as stone, met Malloy's. Silence stretched, thick as storm clouds. And slowly, Malloy realized the town had gathered at the edge of the road, drawn by the noise. Faces peered from wagons, from saddles, watching. For the first time, Malloy looked small in their gaze. His bluster faltered. He yanked the reins, spat into the dirt, and wheeled his horse away, the whip dangling useless at his side. The onlookers lingered, murmurs weaving through the air. The sheriff tipped his hat to Zeke, not as warning this time, but as quiet acknowledgement. Then the crowd dispersed, gossip already changing its shape. What had been scorn now carried a thread of reluctant respect. That night, the farmhouse glowed with lamplight. Supper was simple, stew, bread, nothing more, but it tasted of victory. Caleb laughed, a sound light and unguarded, and it startled everyone at the table into smiling. Clara's shoulders eased, no longer hunched in fear. Eleanor caught Zeke's eye across the table, her gaze warm with gratitude, though no word passed between them. Outside, the fields lay dark and silent, washed clean by rain. Inside, silence no longer felt like emptiness, but like shelter. Zeke sat with his hands around a chipped mug, listening to the gentle rhythm of family that had begun to grow in his house. He thought of the boy's first question, the whip that had haunted every breath since. And he knew now what answer he would give, if ever asked again. Sometimes the world will try to make you small, to cut you down with laughter and lash. But dignity is not granted by crowds. It is carved in silence, in the choice to stand when fear demands you kneel. The whip of the world will always crack, but so too will the hand that shields another. And in that shelter, even the most abandoned soul can learn to breathe again. But as the fire burned low and the others drifted toward sleep, Zeke caught the faint echo of hoofbeats on the distant road. He rose, peering into the night. The horizon was dark, but the sound lingered, a reminder that storms do not vanish with one defiance. They wait, gathering strength, testing the walls we build around those we choose to protect. And for the first time in years, Zeke was ready.